Since late last summer, hundreds of thousands of Rohingya refugees have fled atrocities and violence in Myanmar. The United Nations says it's the largest mass migration of an ethnic group in modern history. Now, most are now residing in neighboring Bangladesh, where they're in desperate need of food, water, shelter, basic necessities of life. Our next guest says this humanitarian crisis could have been avoided, but grave missteps were taken by the United States under President Obama. Amjad Mahmood is an adjunct professor at UCLA Law School. He recently wrote an article about this for Foreign Policy Journal. Mr. Khan, thank you so much for joining us. First, please explain for our audience, who are the Rohingya people and what's the persecution that they faced in Burma, Myanmar?
Yes, the Rohingya are an ethnic minority in previously known as Burma, and now present-day Myanmar. And they've been living since the 12th century, inhabiting a region of Burma, now Myanmar, the Rakhine region on the border near Bangladesh. And they are largely Muslim, though not entirely Muslim. They're also consisting of Hindu individuals who represent or are part of the minority. And their history dates back several centuries. One can argue that they were indigenous to native Burma or Myanmar, that region.
Yeah, we've heard a lot about atrocities committed against them. Some people even say it's ethnic cleansing. But now President Trump has been criticized for mishandling the Rohingya issue. But you say President Obama's decisions actually helped create the current crisis. So please explain to us.
I don't think there's any doubt that the present crisis is a consequence of the prior administration, and I would say administrations dealing with this issue. Myanmar is a very complicated nation and has had a long history of you can say dictatorial regime and rule, an autocracy, no democratic movement. So the U.S. policy, particularly after the Myanmar independence in '89, has created a situation where U.S. policy towards them has been tricky. But the prior administration, the Obama administration, and what I speak about in the article, they systematically and strategically wanted to treat Myanmar in a manner that is democratic and laud its impulse for democratic rule, and therefore lift sanctions that had been in place by the United States for a long time. And they did this even as the crisis involving the Rohingya escalated. And if you actually examine the past 18 months to 2 years, that particular policy, which was very deliberate by the prior administration, while acknowledging that the Rohingya were terribly persecuted, never relegated that issue, really, I think, inappropriately, and elevated the impulse for democratic movement through the de facto civilian leader Aung San Suu Kyi, and basically lauded her efforts towards democracy. I mean, the entire world did when it conferred a Nobel Prize on her. But by doing so, the prior administration did not recognize that by desanctioning Myanmar, they were creating conditions that would empower the very military that was brutalizing the Rohingya. And make no mistake about it, there was ethnic cleansing that existed even prior to recent months.
Now, I know some Christians who worked for many years to help the Karen and the Karenni ethnics in Myanmar say the United Nations didn't pay much attention to them or provide much help to the Christians. So why all this attention now to the Rohingya?
It's a fair question. I don't think there's any doubt that there's been persecution of the Christian minority in Myanmar, and there's been a general plight of ethnic minorities. It's a very volatile situation. I think the Rohingya have been persecuted for many years. I think it primarily has to do with the staggering human toll and the visual imagery. Obviously, 200 villages being burned and razed, dramatic displacement, and for the current civilian leader not to call it an ethnic cleansing. In fact, the prior administration didn't use that phrase either. The current administration has been better on it. I think it's unfortunate. I think there should be an emphasis an equal emphasis on the plight of minorities under brutal military rule in Myanmar, of Christian and Muslim minorities. It's a very unfortunate situation. I study Muslim minority communities in South Asia and the Middle East, so I'm acutely aware of the plight of Christian minorities and have represented them actually in legal proceedings. So I'm very attentive to that, and it's very unfortunate. But in this particular case, what is happening to the Rohingya is a genocidal practice.
You know, CBN has been doing what it can through our humanitarian organization to help the Rohingya. But what else can people do? Just the average American, what steps can they take?
I think it's a very good question. I think there are a tremendous number of organizations that are focused on this, and I particularly applaud the Christian community and various humanitarian organizations who are trying to help the Rohingya. I think the average American can view this issue not really from the lens of a particular religion, but just from a lens of humanity. There is no doubt that this community is effectively stateless. It is a tragedy that we haven't seen in many decades. And if it's not stopped and dealt with, it could have tremendous consequences for future humanitarian disasters.
Okay, Professor Khan, we appreciate the fact that you're bringing this to the world's attention, and we appreciate you for being with us today to provide your insights. Thank you very much.